On today's Wacky Wednesday, Matt Powell finally admits he knows nothing about Charles Darwin.
I have not actually looked into Darwin at all.
Yes, I am back from my deathbed, and boy, have I missed you guys. Yes, how do, dearest viewer, and welcome back to my little corner of the YouTubies. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, please like, share, and subscribe. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you to my amazing patrons as well. Sven Bellens. Sven, brother, your video is going to come very, very soon, I promise you. Last week I was so ill I couldn't do anything. And also thank you to Bob Sadler and Alan L. Why not join me on Patreon for just £3 a month? Come and join me on Patreon. Link is in the description below, and you can help me buy better equipment so I can turf out better quality videos. Thank you so much. Now, 2 bits of news. I was ill last week, very, very ill, so I couldn't put a video out, and I'm very, very sorry about that. But one thing that got me through was, I know it sounds cliched, but I'm telling the truth. One thing that got me through was your messages of support and get well soon, etc., etc. I did have a laugh, and I did try and respond to all the comments. So I can't thank you enough. We're building up a really good community here on this channel, and you know, we all have a laugh. We all have a debate, etc., etc. But the main thing is we all have a good time. You get the occasional troll, but they're dealt with. And, you know, thank you to everybody. So spread the message far and wide. Nice little friendly community here. So, you know, and like I said, we all have a laugh, basically, don't we? So, and the second piece of good news is that my channel has been approved for the YouTube Partner Program. Yes, the YouTube Partner Program, yes. So this means every month I earn a whopping 4 pence from YouTube showing ads on my videos, etc., etc. Thank you, amazing YouTube. Better in my pocket than it is yours. So I'm going to throw that money, what I get from YouTube, etc., I'm going to throw it all together in a big pot, Patreon, and then buy some better gear. So that's the good news over and done with. Now, let's look at the bad, shall we? Yeah, Matt Powell. If you don't know who Matt Powell is by now, he is, where the bloody hell have you been? Have you been on another planet? He is a young Earth creationist, which means that he believes the Earth to be 6,000 years old, there or thereabouts. Can't give an exact date. Shocker. He believes that God did everything in 6 days. Has no evidence for it. Shocker. And he obviously has a beef with evolution, because evolution would obviously destroy the myth that is the 6,000-year-old Earth. Plus, he also picks on a man that's been dead for, what, 140 years or so, namely Charles Darwin. Now, Matt, picking on a man that can't answer back is a bit cowardly, if you don't mind me saying. So, we are going to take a look at one of Matt's latest videos. This one is entitled "The Most Scientifically Illiterate Man Ever." Right. This is coming from Matt Powell. So, let's take a look at the facts, shall we? On one hand, you have Matt Powell, a man that hasn't spent a single nanosecond at university studying any kind of science whatsoever. And then on the other hand, you have Charles Darwin, a man who started off studying medicine when I think he was about 15 or 16, and then moved on to Edinburgh University, and then went to Cambridge University studying various sciences, as well as beetles and barnacles, I think he did as well. So, you know, he was quite well rounded, and he also studied geology. Now, let's weigh those two people up, and let's decide who is the most scientifically illiterate. I think I can probably guess which way you guys will go. So, let's go on with the video, shall we? And let's point and laugh at what Powell has to say for himself.
Darwinism is so weak, and I want to end it here.
Well, that's Powell all done, dusted and debunked. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm only toshing with you.
Who has ever seen these stickers?
Couldn't tell you with all honesty, but if I did see one, it wouldn't trigger me anywhere near as much as it triggers you.
When they go down the road. Very common. Yeah, Matt and Josh has seen them. I've seen them all the time.
Right, that answers that question then. I guess they are more popular in the United States in America than they are over here in the United Britain.
Look, anybody that puts a Darwin fish on their car, that person might as well just tell me, I have not actually looked into Darwin at all.
Or they might as well tell you that they are supporting and respecting a man that dedicated his life to learning more about how humans and how life itself evolved. You might not agree with his findings, but you could admire his dedication, couldn't you? But you won't, will you? Because you're a dick.
Darwin could not even get a job. You're putting a sticker of a guy that could not even get a job. His dad had to get him a job.
So he couldn't get a job. He couldn't get a job. His dad had to get him a job. So he did have a job, right?
He was such a failure in life, an unpaid job as a comforter for a ship captain as they're floating about near the Galapagos.
But you're working an unpaid job on Kent Hovind's compound. What's the difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. Charles Darwin's job was honourable. Yours isn't.
What a joke.
No, Powell, you uprooted your young family to move them hundreds, if not thousands of miles, to move into a compound run by a disingenuous, dishonest, lying cult leader, and now you fix windows. Who's the joke again?
This is the man that they say is so scientific. They have a statue of Darwin. Oh, so amazing. I got to see the Darwin statue.
Wow, and 140 odd years after his death, people are still talking about him. Amazing. And they will continue to talk about him for the next 140 odd years and beyond. His work was that important. We learned an awful lot from Charles Darwin and we improved on what he taught. So we've learned so much. He set the wheels in motion, and as technology grew and as our understanding grew, we improved upon his theories, which is what science does basically. It evolves. So I ask you, Powell, what's going to happen, 140 odd years after you throw a 7? What legacy will you leave behind?
Oh, really? Darwin said, and I quote, often a cold shudder has run through me, and I've asked myself whether I've devoted myself to a fantasy. Charles Darwin was afraid that he was living in a fantasy.
You dirty, dishonest, cherry-picking, quote-mining oaf. But you're a young earth creationist. It comes with a job. You have to lie. You have to deceive. You have to quote-mine. You have to cherry-pick. Let's have a look at Charles Darwin's quote in full and in context, shall we? So, Powell, here is the quote in full and, more importantly, in context, something which is very, very alien to you. So, Powell, mouth shut, eyes and ears open, get ready. This quote comes from a letter from Darwin to his mentor, the geologist Charles Lyell, from the 23rd of November 1859, whilst On the Origin of Species was being published. Darwin expressed how much it means to him that he has Lyell's support, and here is the quote in context. I rejoice profoundly that you intend admitting doctrine of modification in your new edition. Nothing, I am convinced, could be more important for its success. I honour you most sincerely to have maintained in the position of a master one side of a question for 30 years and then deliberately give it up is a fact to which I much doubt whether the records of science offer a parallel. For myself also, I rejoice profoundly for thinking of the many cases of men pursuing an illusion for years. Often and often a cold shudder has run through me, and I have asked myself whether I may not have devoted my life to a fantasy. Now, I look at it as morally impossible that investigators of truth like you and Hooker can be wholly wrong, and therefore I feel that I may rest in peace. And at the bottom, here we have another instance of a very telling sentence being omitted from a quote. Darwin stating that he did not feel he had been devoting himself to a fantasy. Powell, did you listen? But, more importantly, did you understand? I'm thinking probably not.
You know, Brother Parsons, if I got up here and I said,
Really? You call each other brother? Wow, that really is a compound.
no, Will, it's been great giving this message here tonight, but I'm afraid I'm living in a fantasy. Would you trust anything that I'm saying?
But no one with more than half a brain cell trusts what you're saying anyway.
No. So when Darwin says, I'm afraid I'm living a fantasy, why in the world would you trust somebody like that?
So what you're saying is that I should not trust a man who spent the best part of a decade at university and trust a man who hasn't spent a nanosecond at university studying any kind of science, and a man who says something like this.
And as far as homosexuality goes, you know, I believe the Bible puts a death penalty on it. I believe it's disgusting.
And I should also trust a man who says something like this.
I believe that homosexuals are pedophiles. I believe every homosexual is a pedophile.
Okay, speaking as a lesbian, I have never, ever had sex with someone who was underage.
And you're also asking me to trust the word of a bully.
Dude, you will go to hell!
Who should I trust more? It's a difficult one, isn't it, viewer?
Why not trust somebody that said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life?
And the only evidence that you have that Jesus Christ spoke those words is a scientifically inaccurate 2,000-year-old book of fables. Right.
Somebody who spoke with absolutes. Not somebody who says, I'm afraid I'm living in a fantasy. Jesus didn't speak like that. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Jesus spoke in absolutes. Darwin said, I'm afraid I'm living in a fantasy. Who are you going to trust, folks? Are you going to trust God, or are you going to trust man?
I think I will go with man on this one, mainly because there is actual evidence for Darwin's existence. What we don't have is evidence for God's existence.
Are you going to trust the man who couldn't get a job?
But Powell, you don't have a job.
The man who was a failure in life? The man who literally went onto a ship?
Right, so a man who studied science for most of his adult life. Right. A man who gained a degree in theology. And a man who wrote and published over 50 books. Yeah, sounds like a failure to me. Of course he does. What have you done, Powell? Apart from lie to people, deceive people, and fix windows. What have you done? Do you know, if I was half the failure that you claim Darwin to be, I would be unbelievably rich and have as many women as my tongue could cope with.
Landed on the Galapagos, saw a couple of finches, and concluded that finches and bananas were related, just because finches speciated.
Wrong, yet again, Powell, but then again, when have you ever been right? And, seeing as you like quotes so much, funnily enough, you didn't include this quote in your little video, but I'm going to include it in mine. Here we go. This is during the Galapagos Islands study. Darwin noticed that fruit-eating finches had parrot-like beaks and that finches that ate insects had narrow prying beaks. He wrote, one might really fancy that from an original paucity of birds, one species had been taken and modified for different ends. Not one single mention of a banana.
Bill Nye says he's the number one discoverer in all of science. Darwin is. Oh, what a joke. Really? That's your number one discoverer, huh, Bill Nye?
Really? That's your rebuttal? What a joke. Really? Bill Nye has forgotten more about science than everybody in your little compound, and that includes your cult leader.
The man who said that he's afraid he's living in a fantasy.
And you are quote mining yet again.
Bear in mind that our next number one discoverer came across some things in nature that surprised him, and he tried to explain what he saw. It's not the story of a guy just trying to cause trouble. It's the story of the guy who made what you and I consider the #1 discovery in science so far.
Wow, what an amazing, mature, adult scientific response. A laughing track. I wish I'd have thought of that. I think that's enough Powell for one video, don't you? What? Is that the end of the video? But you wanted me to make a contribution, Mr. Jones. No, I didn't, you lying banana. It's a split. Oh, right then. I'll bugger off, you ungrateful fat turd. So that's Matt Powell, all done, dusted and destroyed. Thank you so much for joining me. Please join me in the next one, the Sunday Stupid at 8 PM. Links to my Patreon and playlists and Twitter in the description below. If you are an atheist, please have a safe and wonderful Saturday. And if you are a Christian, please have a safe and Merry Christmas.